hello again, and the very warmest of welcome backs to all my YouTubers, but more especially to all my subscribers who support and tune into my channel regularly for their weekly fix of looking at these old vintage off-roaders. Now in this next feature clip we're going to take a browse at some short video clips and pictures of a few machines I came across at the Classic Motocross Des Nations event that was held at Bennetts Hill racetrack in Reading in the UK during 2015. So I do hope you'll stay with me for the next few minutes as we check out a short selection of Chzechslovakian Jawa dirt bikes. Now our very first example is Joe Relofa's ESO Jawa 500, who was part of the Netherlands racing team. Now my apologies if the riders' names are not pronounced correctly in this video, as my actual grasp on the various different European languages is almost non-existent, and as you would expect they also tried very hard on the day to understand my broad Scottish accent when I was asking questions about the various machines. So unfortunately this video will more than likely end up being the most ill-informed project I've ever done, as I know absolutely nothing about these bikes, but then again they're all still worth a look, and I'm sure you'll appreciate the content. Now Jawa motorcycles, or Java to use the correct pronunciation, was actually founded in Prague in Czechoslovakia in 1929. Now to list Java's motorcycle models on this video would take longer than the actual clip itself, but it's suffice to say from 1929 to the present day they manufactured a multitude of different mopeds, motorcycles and even cars on their list of past vehicles. Now this next machine is Czech Republic rider Radek Zaradnik's Jawa 400 race bike. Now many of these Eastern European machines, as you would expect, are very seldom seen here on the UK mainland, and this 2015 Motocross Des Nations race event was a very good opportunity for me myself to have a look at these very different Jawa race bikes. Now as you can see, this particular bike looks like it has a forward propelled kickstart, whereby the kickstart is actually pushed away from the motor. Although this is still a quite nice example of one of these Jawa two-stroke engines, as there were so many different configurations of these bikes at this event that weekend, and the one or two bikes featured here are really just a quick sample of what kind of vintage machines were on display on the day. But most of these Jawa machines had alloy wheels fitted. They also had metal fuel tanks in either alloy or steel, and almost all of them were different in their own way, but it was great to see how the East Europeans built their off-road dirt bikes. Now in this video you'll also see that many of these bikes had a few CZ parts fitted to them, as of course Jawa and CZ were both producing their own brand of motorcycles in virtually the same factories, and many parts were shared between several models on both Jawa and CZ machines. Although you have to admit this is still a very nice looking vintage machine, and this was very quick on the track, this bike, as I soon witnessed not long after these video clips and pictures were snapped. Okay, next up, these are Ustra's Jawa 500 race bikes, and these were raced as part of the Belgian Classic racing team. Now these are another cracking pair of Jawas with what looks like a fiberglass fuel tank and a quite modern looking rear tailpipe. Now I'm quite sure that this is a fiberglass tank sitting here on top of this big single cylinder Jawa 500 motor, but in this bike's case it looks like some backstreet engineering has been taking place to convert this to a right-handed gear shifter. But of course these big 500 Jawa singles are big powerful bikes, and almost all of them run on methanol rather than regular gas, because the methanol fuel helps to cut down on the pinking or pinging in the barrel, and also makes the cylinders run cooler than a petrol powered equivalent. But of course the downside of using methanol is when it does ignite outside the motor, the flames are invisible to the naked eye, and you only know there's a fire when you actually start to burn, as a few of my racing friends have learned recently to their cost. But from past experiences of these big Jawa singles, I do remember they had a total loss oil lubrication system whereby you filled the front frame down tube with oil, and this little external oil pump then pumped the fluid around the motor and then out onto the ground. But this was a system that many other early motorcycles used, including the 1930s Jap engines, which were built by John Alfred Prestwich. Now this next Jawa bike is a gorgeous looking machine, and this is Milan Kotlar's ESO Jawa 500, who was racing this bike as part of the Czech Republic racing team. Now the ESO part of the Jawa logo was actually founded by Czech motorcycle racer Jaroslav Simandy, who built purely racing bikes from 1949 until he then joined up with Jawa in 1964. Now ESO Jawa used Jap engines initially to power their motorcycles, but then they designed and built their own engines from around 1950. But for me personally, this was one of the nicer bikes of the weekend, with its black chrome moly steel frame, these CZ front forks and hubs, and of course a steel fuel tank with also a custom built polished alloy airbox. Now we're back to a left-sided shifter on this bike, and also in this shot you can get a better idea of how that oil lubrication system works with these oil feed pipes. But again, another big powerful motor, and it looks great in this particular chassis. Now this bike's wheels are not originals, although they do have a good pair of Tagasago XL alloy rims fitted with their associated drum brakes. But back in the day, many of these big Jawa 500 motors were designed for use as speedway engines, which is another reason they had the total loss oil lubrication system, which was to keep weight down and not have the bike to carry a separate oil tank when it was racing. But this is still a very nice example, and who wouldn't be proud to own such a beauty as this. Now this was another nice old Jawa bike I captured at the 2015 event, and this is Jos Verwich's lovely Jawa 250. Now I'm almost sure that this is not an original bike, and it looks to me like it's been put through the full restoration process, although the bike builder, you have to admit, has made a stunning job of this little 250 racer. Now naturally I'd like to tell you more about the bike with regards to its year of manufacture, although because of the language barrier on the day, my interpretation of this Dutch owner's accent was probably as bad as his understanding of my Scots tongue, but nevertheless it's still a superb looking little bike. Now this bike was a twin spark 2-stroke motor, of course, and the fuel tank is also made of steel this time, and I just absolutely love those leather side panels which are fastened to the frame with these snap-on clips. But that fuel tank was so shiny you can actually see my camera panning in the reflection of the chrome finish. Now, as I mentioned, a single cylinder two-stroke again this time, and quite uniquely this bike also had a twin port exhaust system, as used of course on many of Jawa's sisters machines, CZ motorcycles, although I'll wager that this is an extremely rare old motorbike, and fair play to the owner for using such a machine to actually race on the track. Now, once again, the use of CZ front forks and brake hubs, which is perfectly legitimate for its time when you consider of course that Jawa CZ were more or less the same company back in the day. But you have to admit this is quite a view with these pair of twin tailpipes sticking out the rear of this little 250. But these twin port two-strokers were hugely successful as off-road scramblers back in the 1960s and early 1970s, and it wasn't only Jawa but CZ used them to great success during the heydays of that particular period. But original or not, this is still a superb looking little race bike, and I was very lucky on the day to be able to take a quick look around it. But with that 250 Jawa two-stroke engine, that chromed fuel tank, the genuine Jawa front and rear mudguards, and of course not forgetting those nice leather side panels that go into making this a very unique and desirable little motorbike, and once again another European classic. Now, okay, our next bike is a very brief look at Englishman Matty Taylor's 1964 MTS Jawa 500. Now, in case you don't know, Matty Taylor is renowned for building these quite unique bikes, and the MTS abbreviation is for the Matty Taylor Specials that he puts together. Now, once again, apologies that I can't supply any details of this bike's frame or motor, because unfortunately I don't know any, although I do know that some of the machines that Matty puts together are often works of art in their own right. But there are other videos on my channel of Matty's handiwork if you'd like to take the time to check them out. Now, on the day that I grabbed these clips, Matty also had an MTS Triumph on display, which also was absolutely stunning. But you have to admit that this MTS Jawa is another cracker with this big 4-stroke single cylinder lump in the chassis. But although this is just a micro glimpse of Matty's Jawa, you have to admit it does look the dog's bollocks in the early morning sunshine. Okay, this is another bike from the Czech Republic racing team at the Classic MXDN 2015, and this is Miroslav Marosek's Jawa 250 two-stroker. Now, an alloy fuel tank this time, as opposed to some of the previous bikes with their older steel or fiberglass parts. And actually the Czech Republic, as you would expect, had brought along all manner and configuration of not only these Jawa models but some lovely CZ bikes as well to this Classic Des Nations event. Now, they also had loads of spare original parts for these vintage racers on display, which proved very popular with the other riders in the paddock, but albeit they were a bit pricey, it has to be said. But these one or two examples that we see here are just a few of the many bikes that the Czech Republic had brought along to this 2015 race event. Now this next old classic was actually a machine that wasn't listed in the event programme on the day, so I was unable to identify it. Now it could have been up for sale actually on the day, although I never saw any evidence to say that it actually was. But anyhow, the bike does look like a 500, as are most of these big single cylinder Jawas, although I've heard of owners who actually bore them out and then fit exotic camshafts and bigger valves to help increase the power output of what in its standard form is still quite a big, powerful engine. But until you've actually seen these big Jawas doing their stuff on the racetrack, it's only then that you can appreciate how good these old Jawa motorcycles were back in the day. So there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed these few examples of the famous Jawa off-road racers. And don't forget, if this is the kind of content that you like to see here on YouTube, then please continue to subscribe to my channel to see more vintage classics right here on Classic Dirt Bike TV. This video was brought to you in association with Wealthsport, the world's #1 supplier for all your off-road, sports and leisure wear. Just visit their online website at wealthsport.com for more details.